show, as always, presented by DraftKings. And Michael, the thing I love about DraftKings is whenever you're scrolling through the sports book, there's always some new market popping up that you didn't notice before. The options are endless. And one that we came across this week is, in addition to, which team is going to have the most wins this season, updated season win totals, they have a little matchups tab that compares two teams and lets you decide whether or not you think this team or this team is going to finish the season with more wins. So, wanted to look at a couple of these head-to-heads, starting with the Steelers and Browns, because two teams right now, both at 7-5, in the thick of it, fighting for one of those final playoff spots in that side of the conference. Steelers minus 115, Browns minus 115, same price. Who do you think, based on their remaining schedule, based on where they are at quarterback, do you think ends up with the most regular season wins?
It's funny. Ed Reed came out and said that, the way he saw Joe Flacco could be comeback player of the year the way he played the other day if he continues that way, which, for all the fun that people were making about Flacco starting, he actually played pretty well. He wasn't the reason they lost. So I think they've upgraded themselves at quarterback. Is Flacco better than Mitchell Trubisky? I think that's the question we're asking here. And I'm not sure the answer is that Trubisky's better. We'll see on tomorrow night how Trubisky handles the starting role. But we know Pickett's going to be out maybe 2, 3, 4 weeks. I mean, the Steelers have when you start losing the games like they have at home, to teams that they shouldn't lose to, like Arizona, you got to worry about them a little bit here. So my instincts say I would go with Pittsburgh because of the Tomlin factor and because Cleveland going on the road doesn't play as well defensively. So I lean towards Pittsburgh here. But if Flacco can put together a couple games like he did at the Rams, they can be pretty good. Because
you brought up comeback player of the year, I did look at the market real quickly. 250-1 for him to climb that ladder. Yeah. So if you want to throw $5 on that, it might be a St. Jude's play, but it might just be something that could have a good result for you at the end of the day.
If they win some of these games, they don't have a tough schedule down the stretch. If they get their act together on the road, look, the reason that the Browns are going to win 10 games if they win 10 and make the playoffs is not going to be because of Joe Flacco. It's going to be because of Joe Flacco not making mistakes. That's what it's going to come down to. It's going to be because of their defense, which is what I was relying on last week, and it didn't happen. So perhaps that'll be the case. But for me, I think if he can do that, I think there's no question that, they can make a run. The problem is when they go to Houston, that'll be a hard game for their defense. Sure. They go to Cincinnati. That shouldn't be because they can dominate Cincinnati with their front, but it's always been a hard game. 3 home games left. They know they play better defense at home. They play against the Jets. They should – they're going to dominate the Jets in that game, right? They've got this Jacksonville team with a backup quarterback. They should be able to, depending on the weather.
Yeah, got lucky from that standpoint. It looks like it's going to be C.J. Beathard, but TBD. Doug Peterson hasn't made an announcement just yet. And Cincinnati, if Jake Browning plays the way that he did this past weekend, that's going to be a tough out, too, for their defense. As far as comeback player of the year goes, we're kind of saying this in jest. Damar Hamlin, obviously an odds-on minus 230 favorite. Aaron Rodgers, I feel like, was the only other possible chance if he were to come back and play, but obviously we firmly believe that's not going to happen. But just putting that out there. Joe Flacco, 250-1. How about the Texans and Colts? We have a plus money option here. The Texans minus 185, the Colts plus 145. Who do you think ends up with the most wins? 2 7-5 teams, similarly looking for those playoff spots.
I'm going to go with the Texans because I think the Texans play better team defense. They're better on defense. The Colts can't stop the run at all, and they were fortunate that Henry got hurt. Both teams are good in the kicking game. I mean, the Colts won last week because of their kicking game. Blocked 2 punts, had returns. So I like them both in those situations. But look at the schedule for Tennessee. Texas. They play Tennessee twice, and Tennessee can't cover anybody, right? They can't cover anybody, and so there's 2 more wins there. They play the Browns at home, which is important because we know the Browns are not great on defense. So I like the Texans here. I think the Texans are a great story. They have unbelievable confidence. Yeah, I know that losing Tank Dell is a problem in the receiving core. Last week they won without Dallas Schwartz. So they didn't have their tight end in the game, and they were still effective. So I really kind of like what they're doing, and I think it'll carry over. Their defensive front with Greenlaw and with Will Anderson are playing well now, and with having Stingley back in the secondary really has helped.
Yeah, Texans have been fun year one under DeMeco Ryans, and C.J. Stroud is a rookie currently leading the National Football League in passing yards. How about to the NFC South we go? The New Orleans Saints and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, both 5-7, a division that is garbage, so the back end of the schedule not particularly difficult for either team, but the Tampa Bay Bucs getting a plus money price. Do you think they could end up with more wins than the Saints, especially now that Derek Carr's dealing with an injury or concussion, but it's still brain injury?
You're asking me to. Well, I mean, I don't know how this is Carr's third actual concussion. How is he going to play? I don't know. For me, I don't trust the Saints. They haven't won. I mean, they've been a horrible home team. They haven't covered at home in 5 games. This goes back to this is a record performance by them. The Bucs are not healthy. And for all the conversation that we have about Tampa, their defense has not played very good. They don't stop you in the red zone. And when you look at where they are, they're supposed to be this great run defense, and yet they can't stop the run. So, to me, you're asking me to pick the lesser of two evils.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't love either of them. I probably lean towards the Bucs. But I think because Mayfield, is playing better. I don't think Mayfield's playing great. I think he's playing better. Now, someone said today on Twitter that Mayfield's in line to get $30-35 million. I mean, if they want to pay Mayfield $35 million, go ahead. I mean, really, seriously, go ahead. A year from now, you'll be complaining.
You're not wrong there. I don't think anybody thought that he was going to step in and be like the true heir of Mr. Tom Brady in Tampa. But they're 2.5-point dog this week in Atlanta against the Falcons for that first game. Against Green Bay after that, Jordan Love has been surging the way that the Packers have played the last 3 games. Jacksonville, perhaps you have Trevor Lawrence back at starter, getting a little bit healthier from that standpoint, so that's no gimme. The head-to-head with New Orleans will be important, and then Carolina, I think that we all just kind of lock in as a win at this point for anybody that's playing them. I don't know. I go back and forth with this one. That division is such a mess. I think that's the only word I can really use to. The division's a mess.
I mean, you're celebrating beating the Panthers by 3, and
barely got through it.
That's the difference between the good and bad, and it really, I mean, Atlanta went into Tampa and they turned the ball over and they still won the game. And this line's at 2.5 at home for Atlanta. Well, we know Atlanta plays pretty well at home, and yet the line doesn't get to 3. I mean, that tells you all you need to know, right? I mean, that tells you nobody trusts Atlanta. Nobody trusts Ritter to protect the ball. I keep saying it every week. He does some really good things at times, but he doesn't protect the football. So how do you trust that? How do you trust the 2.5? It's, to me, this weekend's betting model, I think you have to really take strong consideration to throwing out all the games with weather out of your handicapping, because I think it's too hard, right? I think it's way too hard to handicap football games, be on the right side, and then have this huge variable called wind, rain, and Mother Nature to handicap as well. So I thought this morning when I was working on my notes, if you get rid of the Rams-Ravens, you get rid of Detroit-Chicago, you get rid of Indy-Cincy, you get rid of Jacksonville-Cleveland, and Houston-Jets, there's still a lot of meat on the bone to pick the right games, because those 5 are supposedly, and we'll know more about it later in the week, but they're supposed to be 10-mile winds at least with strong gust and rain.
We'll get into those weather games on the other side of this break as well. But although I like your perspective of, hey, just avoid them if you can. One more quick one, though, in these head-to-heads. Packers, a minus 270 favorite against the Vikings to have more wins. You can get 2-1 if you think the Vikings can turn things around, and it looks like Dobbs will be the starter for this week.
I like the Vikings here. And I tell you what, I think if you go back and study what the Vikings have done defensively, since the 3rd game of the season, they've been really good. They've been really good. You can't run the ball on them. They're very difficult for offenses to play because they do a lot of different things from the same look. They run the zero blitz stuff. They back out of it. They're hard to run the ball on. This is going to be, when you play Minnesota, you have to be very detailed in your analysis and your communication offensively. I think that's a problem. I mean, the last 2 weeks, they've lost 2 games by 3 points total.
Well, and you had that close of a game despite your quarterback turning the ball over 4 times. Just imagine if you maintain possession.
Go to VSiN.com/subscribe to become a VSiN Pro subscriber today.